Jesus freak here. Continuing on a previous topic, I've noticed that some people want to read certain unusual unusual readings, I guess, into the text because they're unusual. And there's various reasons why people might say they think this oddball reading or that oddball reading is most likely to be real. And they'll come up with various theories about why this should be the right wording or this should be the right wording. I remember there was a conversation on one of the forums I frequent regarding Mark 141. All three translations I have at my hand. I have an RSV here, I have a New King James, and I have a King James. They all pretty much read the same, but some people want to take a different reading. And the King James says, Jesus, moved with compassion, put forth his hand and touched him, and saith unto him, I will, be thou clean. New King James. And you know I don't frequently go into the modern versions. I'm doing this as a point of comparison. Then Jesus, moved with compassion, again, same word, stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, I am willing, be cleansed. How about the Revised Standard? This one's based on a different text type. I think it's based on a really early version of Nestle Aland. So, what does this version say? Surprisingly, mostly the same thing. Moved with pity, he stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, I will, be clean. And let's see what my translation. And Jesus, feeling compassion for him, held out his hand, touched him, and said to him, I do want, be clean. But there's a couple oddball manuscripts that for some reason say moved with anger instead of moved with pity. And some people say, anger is a harder reading, therefore the harder reading should be the more authentic one. Is it the harder reading? Or is it just an obvious corruption? Or might it be someone who wanted to, who had an axe to grind and tampered with it? Some might talk about pious alterations, the idea that someone might find something insufficiently respectful to God or the apostles or whatever, and alter things. I think it's more likely to happen in the opposite direction. A deletion by skipping from one word to a similar word or from one letter or syllable to a similar one is, I think, more likely than someone making up an addition out of whole cloth. And I think a lot of the missing passages in your modern versions are going to be a matter of that. Someone's eye slipped. I believe the technical term for that is homoioteleton. Another possibility is that over time what was orthodox changed, and someone decided to tamper with manuscripts because they didn't fit the established orthodoxy or the established narrative. Some believe this happened to 1 John 5, 7, and 8. I personally do not. I do, however, believe it happened at Acts 8:37, that verse I read in the previous video. And this modern version is going to commit the verse to a footnote. It's there, but it's committed to a footnote. You can kind of see it because the thing won't focus. Now, I think this is an example of the orthodoxy changed. They didn't like what was written there, so they changed it. And even though it's a minority reading, it's not associated with the Byzantine type. Maurice Robinson doesn't include it in his text either. And it's not associated with this Nestle Aland trail either. It does exist in Greek. It's not something that just came out of Latin. What would their problem be with it? Oh, they started baby sprinkling and that verse gets in the way. Occasionally you have typographical errors. People's hand might have slipped. That might have confused similar letters. There's a prime example. And in this case, it doesn't make an actual difference theologically because of the way pronouns work. This one is 1 Timothy 2:16. And without controversy, great is the mystery of godliness. God was manifest in the flesh, justified in the spirit, seen of angels, preached unto the Gentiles, believed on in the world, received up into glory. Of course, I know there's cases, groups don't like that verse because the strong statement of the deity of Christ. Now, it happens that the word for God in Greek Okay, I got that one wrong. had to do some messing around in my text editor to get what I wanted. But that's about what you're going to see. Probably will look more like that because of lunate sigma. The line over top means it's an abbreviation. Now, here's a variation you're going to see of the word for God in that passage. Just take those two horizontal lines and God becomes the word for the. And that's going to be reflected in a lot of the modern translations. Back to 1 Timothy. Corrections 3:16. Here it says, "Great indeed, we confess, is the mystery of our religion. He was manifested in the flesh, vindicated in the spirit, seen by angels, preached among the nations, believed on in the world, taken up in glory." Surprisingly, the RSV is using believed on, which is more correct. But notice it said, he was manifested in the flesh. Now there's a footnote here saying Greek who, other ancient authorities read God, others which. Now, this one could theoretically go either way. You could have, are those two horizontal lines supposed to be there, or aren't they? So I'm going to go and see. The Vulgate is translated off a different Greek line of manuscripts than either the Nestle-Aland or the Textus Receptus. And let's see what it has at 3:16. And manifestly, great is the sacrament of piety, and I'm just translating roughly. The Vulgate's known to have some quirks, and it says here, what was manifest in flesh. Neuter gender. So, the manuscript line is kind of unclear, but the most likely readings are either or God was manifest in the flesh or he was manifest in the flesh. The difference is literally only two horizontal lines. Do I think it's more possible that they were there or that they weren't there? I believe they were. Simply because it reads awkward with an omicron there, whereas it reads much better with a theta and an overscore. Now, between theos, shortened to theta and sigma, and os, do I think there's actually a significant difference here? Well, I'm going to go through the text and look for or what we call the antecedent. What is the pronoun referring to? At 1 Timothy 3:16. Now what we have here is in verse 15 it says, "But if I tarry long, that thou mayest know how thou oughtest to behave yourself in the house of God, which is a church of the living God, the pillar and ground of the truth." Now, it's not going to be a church, because the word for church is feminine, and the pronoun is masculine. So what word is it likely to be? It's going to be God, which is masculine. So whichever way you put it, it's going to still say, God was manifest in the flesh, regardless of whether or it says os or theos. However, I honestly think that theos is the more likely reading here. But you'll find os is the one reflected by most modern translations. Probably, I think that's what Nestle Aland has. I think this is a case of textual editors want to be different for the sake of being different, or perhaps they were trying to make it closer to the Vulgate, as I suspect that Nestle and Aland are aligned with the Church of Rome. Now, there's obvious places I'd say that the Textus Receptus reflects a corruption. I mentioned the Libro Ligno thing in the last video. And another case in Revelation. Overall, I think the Textus Receptus is a good reflection of the Byzantine text, of the standard text. However, I do think, it's imperfect. I also think Robinson and Pierpont's recension is imperfect. I think that they chose a couple readings that were less than ideal. By the way, the footnotes in the New King James seem to indicate that the Hodges-Farstad text also lacked Acts 8:37. Anyway, I probably said enough for one video here. Jesus freak out.